Okay, the truth is, you don't get to use the word legendary a lot. I mean, you don't. And I know you're modest enough that you're going to just kind of shy away from it. But in the annals of hockey history and one team, Randy Hahn is legendary. And finally, I found a way to get him on my show. How are you, buddy?
It is great to be with you, the legendary Gary Scott Thomas on the legendary KRTY.
You and I got to town the same year.
That's right.
1991.
91, that's right. Yeah.
We both started this in 1991. And I don't know about you, but I never considered that, my goodness, how many, 30 something years later? I never thought that I'd still be here.
I know. The business we're in, whether it's radio, and that's where I cut my teeth in radio.
CKRW, right?
That's right. Back in the Yukon territory. But it's a transitory business. You got to move around to move up the ladder. And then sometimes you take a step down or go sideways or whatever. And you're right, to be in one spot for 30 some years. This will be our 32nd season with the Sharks. It's hard to process. I probably won't really do that until it is all over and you sit back and think back over all the decades. But, I just keep looking forward and don't check the rearview mirror too often because somebody might be catching up on you.
Well, because you're too busy doing what you're doing. Right?
Yeah,
that's
right.
My thing. Because when somebody's asked me they've asked me the same kind of questions. And I'm like, dude, I'm too worried about the next show. I can't think about what's going on there. And I don't have enough capacity in my brain. I don't know about you. Here's my thing. Somebody will go, hey, that thing you did 2 weeks ago. And I'm like, oh man, if you ask me about something I did at 7:30 this morning, I might be able to help you, but
Right.
I don't have enough space.
Well, and I think part of what we do too, and there's 82 games in the hockey season, and multiply that by 30 years, and you've got thousands and thousands of times you've done that job. You kind of focus on that day, and then you do it, and then somehow parts of it just leave you because you have to make room in your brain for the next game and the next day and the next show. So it's a lot of do the material, flush it, and move on. It's funny though, the same thing happens to me with Sharks fans. They'll refer back to a game, in a season past, or even in the season that we're in, and go, remember the Nashville game? And that was like 6 weeks ago. And I go like, yeah, not really. I remember I was in Nashville and I might have stumbled down Broadway, but I do remember that. But I don't remember that goal in the second period you're talking about.
Yeah, and that's it, because because they're so, and bless their heart, because they have that one thing as a frame of reference, right? I mean, something that stood out for them. And that's the same thing for me. They'll be like, hey, you remember that time you asked Tyler Farr, who's a country singer, something? And I'm like, no. I don't. Remind me. Tell me about it. And here's the fun thing about it. I hope I enjoyed as much as you did, because I get to hear it all over for the first time.
Exactly. Now, it's part of the great thing about the job is that fans remind you of moments that maybe weren't the iconic big moments for the Sharks in their history. And of course, those ones you do remember, but to them, that was a special moment. And you may have forgotten it, and it does remind you of it. And it just shows you that it's a journey, and it's a thing that means a lot to a lot of people. And for me, it's a job, but to the listener and the viewer, it's their joy, it's their fun, it's their escape, and they remember those special things that might not be iconic to anyone else, but to them. And it's fun when you get reminded of that.
Well, last night, this is, as we record this last night, I saw Randy at one of our songwriters events at this winery, and you saw what I do. I walk around and talk to everybody to have that moment. And I always look at it this way. I try to give you that moment because you've given me so many moments, which is why I've been here in this career for so many years. And so I always try to go up and talk, even if it's just something where you just try to say something like that. But it is giving them that moment when you meet somebody and they're so excited. And the same thing, I walk past your table and I'm up on the balcony and somebody goes, is that Randy Hahn? And they were so excited. I was like, he's actually there. And I'm like, yeah, well, after the show, you should say hello. And they're like, no, no, no. I've just never seen him in person. And that was enough for them.
Yeah, it is something that I continue to work on, because sometimes you do have things you have to do, and you do have schedules and things to attend to. But I always try and make that time to stop and talk and give people that moment. Especially when we're in the arena. I mean, fans that are at our games are obviously the hardcore fans. And when they bump into you, when they're walking out, they want a selfie and they want that moment. And I want it too. I need that feedback from the viewer. And it's actually an interesting thing, because the way our broadcast booth is located at SAP Center, we are right in the crowd. And that's how it started when the franchise first came. And back in those days, it was called San Jose Arena. And we were right in the crowd. And then they, in quotation marks, monetized that area where I was sitting, and they booted me up into the press box. Well, I no longer had contact with the fans, because you take that elevator from the internal offices of the Sharks. It goes straight up to the press box. You do your game. You take that elevator, you go straight back down again, and you go home, and you miss that interaction. And now I'm back in the middle of the fans, and have been for a few years. And you walk through the concourse after the game, and you're high-fiving if they won, and you're consoling if they lost, and bumping into old fans that have been there since the old days. And I just enjoy so much more now getting that interaction again, because for a while it felt antiseptic, because I just wasn't coming into contact with the fans as much.
How many towns did you live in and work in before you got to San Jose? Can you remember?
Well, I was born in Edmonton, in Alberta, in Canada, but didn't work in radio or TV there to start. I moved with my family while I was still in high school to Whitehorse in the Yukon Territory.
How big is that? I haven't
by
ever.
Alaska. That at that time, that town was probably 20,000, but it was the capital city.
Yeah.
The entire Yukon Territory probably had 30,000. So 2/3 of the people were right there in that city. And that's where I got my break in radio. So I did my first job there. Then I went to college in Vancouver, got a radio job there. Then I moved back to Edmonton for my first TV job, which was a TV radio job. So I'm still only in 2 cities. Then I moved to San Diego to work at another legendary station, KSON, which has been a country behemoth forever. Worked there, then moved to the Bay Area, moved to San Jose. So now we're on City 4, then moved to Chicago, then moved back to San Jose. So it's really only been 5 places that I've lived and worked, but a couple of them 2 times, and did my fair share of moving around. But it's been nice to be parked in the same spot for a while now, because obviously we love it here.
See, you and I, we have a lot of the same thing, because I started off in a small town in Alabama, and then I went to Louisiana, and then I went to Colorado, to New Mexico, back to Colorado, and then to San Jose. So I don't think you and I basically been to the same amount of places. But I don't know about you, when you're telling your story to someone, and as you develop a new friendship and you have to share all the stories we've all told, it's hard, because they get lost, and I'll say something and they'll be like, well, where are you now? I mean, in the story, and you're like, oh no, that was Albuquerque. And then no, where was that? Well, no, that was in Fort Collins, and then you go all the way. And I'm like, here's the good news: the majority of my stories are from California, because I've been here longer than I've been anywhere else. So
right.
It gets less confusing once we get to California.
Well, and I just think both of us have been very fortunate that we've been able to be in one place for 30 years, going back to how we started this conversation, because so many in our industry, as you well know, friends and colleagues, have to move around a whole lot more and scramble to stay, in the business and stay with a viable company. It could be a station that is sold, and all of a sudden there's new ownership and they want to go in a new direction. Or all it takes is, a new program director or a news director at a TV station, and they want to make a change, and they have somebody in mind to replace you with. And to be able to dodge those incoming missiles for that many years and establish yourself in one place. It's hard, but I feel so fortunate that the luck has fallen my way as well, because there is a whole lot of luck involved in that.
Amen. Was it always the goal? When you got into radio, did you know this is what you wanted to do? Or was TV the big thing? Or, because I tell you this, because I majored in English literature because I started in radio when I was 13. I didn't know anybody who had fun at their job. And I thought subconsciously, you cannot do anything fun for a living, right? So I never even considered radio because it was fun. And I kept working all the way through college, and I was getting out of college, and a buddy who I'd worked with before called me up and said, we have this job in Louisiana. Why don't you come do it? And I'm like, I don't know, getting ready to get my certificate. And he goes, let me explain your career choices to you. He goes, you can either sit in a room and talk to a stick, or you can teach Shakespeare to 10th graders. And he goes, I've worked with you, and I know how much you enjoy talking to the stick. And I'm like, okay. And I said, well, I decided to give it a shot, and I gave myself 6 months. And about 3 months into it, I had the epiphany, well, why not do something fun for a living? Right? But I never thought it was a possibility. So the question to you again, were you more astute? Did you see a path?
At some point, but certainly not at the beginning. And, as I try and think back to when I first started thinking about broadcasting, I was probably that 10-year-old kid in my bedroom at night with an AM transistor radio. And now this is, in Edmonton, and anybody who knows a little bit about radio knows that at night in the winter, AM radio signals will skip, and they will reach places that you would never think you could hear those stations, especially if they were what are called clear channel stations, 50,000 or even 100,000 watt stations. And I used to sit in my bed at night before falling asleep and listen to KSL in Salt Lake City and KFRC in San Francisco. And it carried me to those places, even though I'd never been to them before. It was amazing to me that I could listen to those radio DJs and announcers in my bedroom in Edmonton on this little radio. It was magical. And that's when I first got the bug. And I think, especially with listening to KFRC, because, I was young and pop radio was a thing for me. You get to be 10, 11 years old. You want to hear top 40. And that's what KFRC was, KFRC, San Francisco, and all the jingles, and all that stuff. And I just thought that would be great to do that. But I didn't really set out on a path to do it. I kind of just fell into it by accident. And at one point I thought I wanted to be in production in television. I loved watching The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson, and my hero on that show was the most unlikely hero that you would think a kid who was 14 or 15 would have. It was Fred DeCordova, who was the producer of The Tonight Show for the whole time Johnny Carson was there. And they would usher him on camera every once in a while. He was sort of a foil for Johnny and Ed McMahon. Every once in a while, they would play off of Fred DeCordova. And I thought, I want to be a producer. And I remember writing a letter to him to ask him what it would take to become a producer. I never heard back, but in those days, that's what I thought I wanted to be. And then I continued to fall into being on the air. And then I demonstrated an ability, and then my voice helped as well. And all those things carried me to what I've been doing now. I've really I was very lucky. I was getting paid to do radio when I was 15, when I was in high school. And I really haven't done anything else, which A, is great, but B, if I screw this up, I am completely unqualified to do anything else. And, I don't know. I'm going to be under a bridge in about 6 weeks. So,
dude, I always tell everybody I'm a dancing monkey. This is what I do. I don't do anything else.
I don't really have a whole lot of other skills, except I can BS my way out of pretty much anything.
I love that story. Do you remember any of the names of the jocks, like at KFRC or KSL?
I don't. I wasn't that, because I could only hear it once in a while. But when I did, I knew I wanted to do something like that. And eventually, I suppose I was destined to be if it was going to be sports, I would gravitate to hockey because I'm Canadian,
Yeah.
And in Canada, as soon as you're, able to walk, someone will put a pair of ice skates on you, and they'll put one of those folding metal chairs on the ice in front of you, and you hang on to that or an upside down bucket, and you learn the balance thing of what skating is. And, it's just ingrained into you in the same way in this country, where when you're old enough to stand, your dad's going to figure out a way to get a mitt in your hand and play catch with you in the backyard or kick the soccer ball back there. And that's the way it is in Canada with skating and with hockey. So I guess I was destined to end up broadcasting hockey eventually. It didn't happen right away, but it's been my mainstay now for, as we said, over 30 years.
So I think the way you guys are about skating in Canada, because I grew up in Alabama and Florida is that way about swimming, right? Because you guys have so much ice of the year. You've got to learn how to deal with it. And,
Yep.
and if you live near the beach, you live in a coastal area or water area, no, you have to learn how to swim. I taught my kids their first swim lessons when they were 6 months old. We don't mess around because, we have a pool. Their grandparents live on a lake. My family lives, so you were going to be surrounded by water all the time. So we weren't, and it would be the same way in Canada. It's like, dude, do you realize we have 3 days of summer?
Yeah. we have water. It's just that most of the time it's frozen.
I remember, because you talk about the skipping of the AM radio, and I literally say the most influential person who ever got me into this was at WLS in Chicago, the legendary Larry Lujak.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I was in Alabama, and the same thing. If I woke up early or stayed up late, then I could hear Larry Lujak, right? And so I would wake up early for school because they were on Central 2, just so I could hear Larry Lujak. And I had never heard anybody like that, because when I was growing up, it was the pitter patter happy talk radio. Right? Good
Yep.
Tuesday morning. It's a wonderful day. And it's Uncle Charlie and blah, blah, blah. And Larry Lujak would be like, WLS 509. And I can't feel my legs. And I had never heard anybody be that way. And I'll give you this story. He was always my hero. I read his book, The Super Jock, and the whole thing. And I was working in Colorado, and I was doing 7 midnights at the time. And I had a production, and I didn't get done. I didn't get home till like 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning. And just because I was young and stupid, I called WLS to say hello to Larry Lujak. And lo and behold, he picks up the phone, and he goes, WLS, and the producer picks up, hello, and he goes, I got it. And I'm stunned. I'm like, Larry Lujak. And he goes, yeah. And I said, you don't know me. My name's Gary. I'm in Colorado. I said, I'm in radio, and I got it because of you. And I just wanted to take this moment just to say how much I enjoy your work. And he could have just brushed it off. And he goes, that's great. Where are you working at? We're at in Colorado. They have horses out there. Yeah. He goes, I love that area. And he goes, we'll keep doing what you're doing and just believe in yourself. All right. And I'm like, okay. And he goes, all right, now take care. Bye. And it was all of 45 seconds. But as you can see, all of these years later, it still means something to me. And I've always tried to take that same attitude of, like, when somebody reaches out, as we were talking earlier, you give them that moment. And I learned that was one of my radio heroes, because I was a little bit more geeky about it than you were. But I never saw how you could do it. And I was being paid at 13, $1 an hour. I was making $1 an hour.
I went up to you. I was making $2.25 an hour, and
yeah, but that was
I went in after 6 months and asked for a raise to $2.50, and the station manager told me to get the hell out of his office. So I went across the street. There was a radio station, that the government station, CBC.
Wow.
And they service a much wider area, the entire Yukon territory, but they're much more PBS type radio, NPR, that type of radio station, public service. So I went over there and asked if they were interested in hiring a high school kid part-time. And they said, yes, we are. And they offered me $4.50 an hour after this guy turned me down for a 25-cent raise. So I went back over the street again and I said, yeah, I'd like to give my notice because I'm going to be going to work across the street. And I was 15 and he flew off the handle and told me he would blacklist me and that I would never work in radio again.
Wow.
And
Wow.
much later, after I'd been doing the Sharks for 15 years or so, sought me out on social media and congratulated me and reminded me that he gave me my start.
Wow. That is amazing.
Yeah.
The best thing I think, and you and I told you this and years ago. I don't know if you remember it because who cares what we say? But I had said I think the best thing that ever happened as far as my career from the get-go, I never thought the business owed me anything. And when I reached the level of my own incompetence, that it would kick me out, and then it was time for me to learn a new skill, right? And
Yep.
so I've always went by that. And I think the other key, because somebody goes, how do you last 31 years in the market? And I'm always like, how do you have a career this long? And I'm like, the key is you have to make someone more money than you cost. If you make someone more money than you cost, then you will always be employed. And that's the danger. I had some friends who took a big money contract in New York City. I mean, we're talking 7 figures. They lasted 3 months.
Yeah.
And it was because with that expectation, and also if you're the new program director in town and everybody's always looking for a budget cut, well, we can get rid of that morning show right there. That's costing us that much. And we can find that kid across the street in Canada and we can bring him in for $5.50 an hour.
Exactly.
And he's going to think it's amazing.
Yeah. Well, and the other reality too, on the flip side of that, is that, especially with what I do being tethered to the Sharks brand for as long as I have, the longer I'm there and the more and more generations of fans that grow up watching our games, hearing my voice, the more that just becomes the norm. And, as long as you don't fail miserably, you're going to get the benefit of the doubt in later years in your career because the fans are so into what you do. And for anybody to just come in and decide to make a change for change's sake, they better be very careful with that. And I'm not saying that I have some bulletproof job security or anything, but the fact is that everybody who's watched the Sharks from the beginning has basically, except for the first couple of years when Joe Starkey did some games, they've heard the same voice on TV. And in the case of Dan Rusanowski, who, by the way, is going into the Hockey Hall of Fame this year, our radio broadcaster, they've heard the same 2 voices for 30 years. And to just change that for no good reason, most people wouldn't do that. So we're very blessed in that the longer we're around, in some ways, the more valuable we become.
Absolutely. 100%. Because the situation I'm in, and I know a lot of people here, was KRTY. Our owner died, 98-year-old man, not a tragedy. And the people who were on the board were his 90-year-old friends, and they just decided they didn't want to do with it anymore. And they got offered a buku amount of money by this corporation and they wanted to do something with the signal. Well, we went off the air with amazing ratings. Matter of fact, our morning show was the most listened to morning show country music format per capita in America, which was something I'm obviously proud of. But the cool thing is when we went off, there's somebody else who came on and tried to go into the country lane, and they've so far not even come close to it. And I'm like, well, that's the power of the brand that you were talking about, that people would sample it and go, yeah, but that's not who we expect. So in our mind, that's not really what it is. It's not in our situation, the country music format. And the same with you is that we all have an idea of what the Sharks look and sound like. Right.
Yeah. And I think that, to me, the key word in both these scenarios in the thing you're discussing and what we have is authenticity.
Mm-hmm.
And if you are authentic, and this is not something, and I often talk to young broadcasters, kids who are in college, and they want to do what I do. And it's very hard to be instantly authentic that takes reps. You've got to repeatedly do what you do for a while and get comfortable and get confidence. Our business is crazy. And I'll bet you I'm singing to the choir here when you have to have a lot of self-confidence and believe in yourself, because not many people pat you on the back. There's a lot more people that are waiting for you to stumble or looking to criticize. So, you have to have that self-belief and you have to have that level of self-confidence to keep doing what you do every day and every game. And that's where the authenticity comes in. If you can get to that level where you can be your authentic self on the air for the most part, and of course we do have to sell, I sell tickets and you sell advertising, and that's a reality, because without that, we wouldn't be doing it at all. But if you can develop that authenticity with the viewer and with a brand like a KRTY, people know what to expect because of all the years of authenticity that they've come to expect. And I think that works on our side with the Sharks as well. It's not instant. It takes a long time, but when you have it, it's a great, great thing. And it's what I always tell the young broadcasters. You have to get comfortable enough to where you are yourself on the air.
I think that's brilliant. And I'll ask you this question, because what you said, talent will get you a ways, and especially when you're cheap, right? In your younger part of your career. I probably did not figure out how to do me and not a pale imitation of all those who came before me until I was 36, 37, that it took me literally that long that I can't stand listening to old tapes of myself. Right. I prefer listening to the tapes of myself when I was literally 14 or 15 years old, because that's at least more authentic to who I was at that moment in my life.
True.
Right.
True.
But hearing a tape of myself when I was 29, it's like, dude, that's not you. That's you trying to do a pale imitation of Larry Lujak or Dr. Don Rose or, Rick Dees, all these people who are heroes of mine. And it took a while before I got around to going, I finally figured out what I do. And the funny thing is, it was probably 36, 37 before I figured it out. I was probably 42 before I got good at it.
Yeah, it's a process, and it's just about any walk in life. It takes repetitions. You just have to keep your nose down and grind out day after day, week after week, year after year of getting good at something. And I so often have people so kindly say, I don't know how you do it, all those names and the pronunciations and the numbers, and you know who they are and all that. And I say, most often, there is something, what do you do? Well, I'm an auto mechanic. Well, you have skills that I have no idea what to do. You can troubleshoot probably on the fly and know exactly what it's going to take to fix the problem. And that's your skill. And that came from reps. And that's what you do. What I do is the same thing. It's just what I do. And I can't do what you do. So I'm no better than you. It's just mine is a more visible job that touches people in a little different way.
I know you have to, I can't say this, but I would feel that. You know what my wife's fantasy is? That I came home wearing a tool belt and actually knew how to use it. Right? And my wife's dream is I come in and go, what do you need fixed? All right. Oh, you need that ceiling fan done? I got that. I'm going to do it. I'm going to right now. Because I'm like,
I'll tell you what, a cold can of beer fits in there.
Actually, a few cans of beer, is what I heard.
That's about all I'm good with the tool belt for.
The true story. My wife, when we first started dating, she came into my garage and she's like, where's your toolbox? And I'm like, picked up my cell phone. I said, what you need?
Exactly.
This is my cell phone right here. I can find somebody to do anything you need. I don't ask the auto mechanic to do a 60-second spot.
Nope.
I'll leave it up to him, to fix whatever needs to be fixed. All right. I'm going to take a quick break, come back with Randy Hahn and just some of the other silly stuff that I want to talk about. All right. Coming right back. Here's what we know.
I am so excited to be working with the Nugent Family Counseling Center, founded by Dr. Jeff Nugent. They have 3 office locations in San Jose, Santa Clara, and Reno, Nevada. What they do is support a diverse community of children, adolescents, adults, and families who are affected by conditions such as addiction, depression, anxiety, trauma, stress, and grief. They strive to provide clients with the tools needed to understand and acknowledge the effects that their emotions and behaviors have on themselves and their personal relationships. As Dr. Nugent told me, we try to help our clients fix what's wrong. They don't want you coming forever. They want to help you get past this problem. And they also remind families what they love about each other and utilize a combination of individual, family, and couples therapy. They can help you no matter what you're facing. You do not have to go through this alone. Check out NugentTherapy.com. NugentTherapy.com. You can do this, and they can help. Sterling Oak Cabinetry has one goal: to build the cabinets of your dreams. They literally specialize in custom cabinetry. No cookie cutter, everything looks the same stuff that you find at the big box stores. Your kitchen is the centerpiece of your home, and your home is your biggest investment. They can work with you or your designer to build just what you want with the materials and finish that you want. And because they're a brand new company, they'll be getting busier and busier. But if you order right now, they'll get your order to you in 6 to 8 weeks. In the world of cabinetry, that's blindingly fast. Contact Rob Scovman at RSKOVMAND at yahoo.com or go to SterlingOakCabinetry.com and get your dreams made reality tomorrow.
So here's my deal. You travel a lot. What are your best travel tips? What's your secret? Because that's the hard thing. You're talking 82 games. So that's what? At least 41 travel games?
Yep. Yeah, 41. And then
not
multiply
playoffs.
that usually by 3, because that's the days before and the days after games. And, we're probably in a hotel 130, 135 nights a season if you include playoffs. So it's a lot of time. I must start off by saying that we travel about as first class as you can.
Yeah.
We have a private jet, a 737. We basically go on the schedule that the team wants, not what an airline wants. So, for example, after a game, say we're playing in Buffalo and the next night we're playing in Montreal, because quite often we do play back to back. We would leave the arena in Buffalo on the team buses, go straight to the runway of the airport. And they do some security there, not the same you would have going through a regular airport, of course, and get on the plane, take off and go straight to Montreal and maybe land there at 1 a.m. and get on that same bus on the other side, sometimes clearing customs right on the tarmac, never going through the main airport, and then straight to a 5-star hotel. So it's a very, very privileged way to travel. For me, the constant battle is to travel light, because you have to schlep those bags through the lobby yourself, and you don't want to have too much gear to carry around. So that's my key is what shirts can I use with the same suit multiple times and mix the tie up every game so that nobody sees the same tie, suit, and shirt twice on the same road trip. Those are the kind of challenges I have. These are first world problems, but that's part of what you prepare for when you travel. And I think the other thing that I try and do is get exercise, and whether that's going out for a run on the road or taking a good long walk, or choosing to walk rather than taking the bus to the arena if it's close enough, stuff like that. And making sure I always have water in my room, and grabbing, little snacks that I can keep in my room so I don't have to deal with astronomically priced room service and things like that. And now with one of the great things in the world when you travel now is DoorDash, because they'll come right to the lobby of the hotel. Most hotels won't then allow them to deliver it to your room, but you can order from any restaurant in town, and for just a little bit of an upcharge, they'll bring it right to you at the hotel, and you can enjoy your choice of room service at a much better price. So if I was going to give you the best travel hack that you could, rather than pay all those room service charges, if you care about how much money you spend. Just download that DoorDash app and plug in your credit card, and you can get whatever food delivered from whatever restaurant in that city. And, most cities have great choices, and it's a fun way to sample that food, maybe on a night when you don't feel like going out and going to the restaurant yourself. You can have it right in your room.
So I think that's brilliant because I don't travel a lot. And of course, I can imagine if you're Rusanowski, his packing is a lot easier than yours. I know as a radio guy, my wife, you'd love my wife. We just went to Italy for 2 weeks and we went in carry-ons. Us and our two sons. We had
That
4
could not happen in
carry-ons,
my house.
4 carry-ons and 3 backpacks. And here's the funny thing. At the end of the trip, we all agreed we packed too much.
Yeah. We always end up taking more than we need. And I even on Sharks road trips, as long as I've been doing this, the longer trips, say 6-7 game trips where you're going to be on the road for 2 weeks, inevitably, I come home with 2 shirts or 3 that I never wore. It just seems to be the way it goes. But, we can get by with a lot less than we think, even when traveling, that's for sure.
And it was interesting about the exercise thing because I saw you last night. You look great. You always look great. I mean, tell me about your workout routine. I mean, and I'm not saying that to embarrass you. I say that as I admire it. I try to run. I know it's a shocker that I do run at the size that I am, but my superpower is I can run for a pretty long distance, and I've never had back or leg problems, even at this age.
Yeah, that you are blessed in that regard. And I've been lucky with that too. And I probably did a lot more running pre-COVID than I do now. Do a lot more walking now. We have 2 English cream golden retrievers. So they're the white golden retrievers, and they're good sized dogs, 70, 80 pound dogs. And they need to walk. I mean, they need that recreation every day. So that's where I'm getting a lot of my workout now, is being out with those dogs and doing that. And again, just choosing the chance to walk. I live on a golf course. I'm blessed with that. And my mate here, he's an Aussie. He and I will walk more often than not. And by the time you work it all out, that's about a 6-7 mile walk, pulling that golf cart. So that's a really good workout. Plus it's fun. And, depending on if anybody plays well, you might even work in a little bit of birdie juice, if you know what I mean. But that's kind of my workout regimen right now. Have the Peloton back here as well somewhere, and get on that every once in a while, but try and mix it up so I don't get bored. But I thank you for the compliment. I'm always trying to lose a few lbs, but it's so tough because I love food. My wife owns a bakery. She owns a cupcake bakery in San Jose. Frost, I'll give her a plug.
Exactly.
And
a very famous cupcake bakery.
Yeah. She won Cupcake Wars on the Food Network. And so and she's a great cook, and I love food, and I do enjoy a good beer, Canadian. That Canada and beer goes hand in hand. And I'm also German, and I've been to Oktoberfest 9 times in Munich. So I enjoy beer, and I enjoy a nice cocktail every once in a while. So if you're going to do those things, you got to pay the price somewhere. And what I try and do, I saw a guy talk about it the other day, is if you're gonna need that workout, do it as early in the day as you can, or as he put it, swallow the frog. Get that one thing out of the way in your day early that you don't really feel like doing, but you have to. Do that as early in the day as you can. Swallow that frog, get it down your throat, and then you can go on with the rest of your day, and it's done.
See, because I can't go early, right? Because of what I do. And we do the show, but like today, as you and I record this morning, when we get done, I can stand up and show you. I have on my running shorts and my running shirt, and I'm going to take off and go ahead and swallow the dang frog.
Yep,
because
you gotta do it.
It's Friday night and I've got to go back, and we have the songwriters thing. But when I work the songwriters, I don't drink, because I always sit back and say, for me, when I work, if there's a microphone or alcohol involved, I have to say no to one of them. Right. Sure. And so I say no to the alcohol. But tonight when I get home, I will have my traditional Friday night martini. It's just
Absolutely.
what I do.
Gin or vodka?
Vodka. I wish I could say I like gin, and I've tried, but I'm just not a gin guy. And when it comes to alcohol, I don't like sweet. Sweet is where the danger lies. I was having this conversation last night, and I say it this way: I like martinis, I like red wine, and I like good beer, really good beer. And the thing I like about that is that when you're drinking those, you are holding the snake, right? Because you know, you have a martini, the martini's going, you sure you need another one of these, Chief? Because I mean, I'm here and I'm going to punch you right in the face. But if you're having a margarita, yeah, let's have another that went down so easily. Let's do another. You know, by the time you get to your third beer, your belly's going, hey, Hoss, we're getting full here. And wine's got such a high alcohol content that again, it's like a monsieur. It'll be me.
But with those margaritas, they go down too easy. And before long, you're saying the longer I stand here, the drunker I get.
Exactly. That's where hammer time lasts.
Or take me drunk, I'm home. or I'm a lot more sober than some think Peep I am.
But you never see people. Did you see Larry got hammered? What did he do? He drank 4 martinis. No, he didn't. And you get so hammered that even your brain goes, stop. It's when you're drinking, the Long Island iced teas or the something that's nice and sweet that you can just go, oh, yeah, I have another.
For me, the limit is tea martinis.
I always say this. They're like breasts. 1's too few, 3's too many. I'm just saying. And if you're going to have 2 martinis, then that's all you're going to have.
Yes.
That is it. That is over. It is out. But yeah, and I always take the attitude that since I'm going to have the martini late tonight, it's imperative I go run today because I have to pay for the martini.
Yep.
And so I do the same thing because I've also learned this about me. I'm not going to have just a bite of food. I know portion control is everything. And I also know that I suck at it. Did you see the study? I literally talked about this morning. They've decided that BMI index does not matter as much as they used to think it did when it comes to longevity.
Well,
that if you're going to...
You and I are at the point in our lives where we're starting to think about longevity.
I'm just trying. Matters now. I'm trying to hang on as long as I can. Listen, I don't know how much time I have with you. Do you need to go? And if you do, please tell me.
No, I'm good.
Okay. All right. Because I wanted to ask you this. As I told you, for me in this business, I have names that influence me a lot. And it was Larry Lujak. If I sit back and go, who's my list of the greatest of all time in what I do? I would put Larry Lujak. I would put a guy named Rick Dees, who's legendary in this scenario. I would put
Disco Duck.
Yeah. Do you know? Here's the thing. This is years ago. And I'll share this old radio story with you, and I'll share everything else. I got this call from a guy saying, hey, the CEO of Replay TV wants to come by and say hello. He listens to you all the time. And I'm like, wow. If you remember, most people don't remember TiVo, but when TiVo came out, it was TiVo and Replay TV. They were competitors, right? And I'm like, oh, okay. And he comes in. His name is Kim LeMasters. Y'all look him up, Kim LeMasters. And he comes in and they bring me a Replay TV. And he's like, I listen to you every week. He goes, I fly in from Los Angeles on Sunday night and I listen to you I get up Friday morning and I listen to your show and I have one meeting and I go home. And I'm like, wow. And this guy has produced everything. I mean, this guy has been on every big 70s TV show and movie you've ever seen. And he goes, hey, you play golf, right? I said, yeah. He goes, come down to our club and play. He goes, you ever heard of Rick Dees? I said, yeah. He goes, he's a member. You want to play with him? Okay. And so I take the Southwest trip and I go down and I get off and I take the taxi to the club. Here's the other story. I'm in the club and I'm going around and I'm in the locker room and I'm walking around the locker room and they have all these lockers that are just, about 7 feet high. And I walk around and I walk right into this man and knock him down, literally on the ground. I look down and on the ground is Joe Pesci.
Oh, no.
And the only thing I can think of is, am I funny to you? Am I funny to you?
Yeah.
Right? And I'm like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. And he's like, he was the nicest man. He goes, don't worry about it. This happens all the time. He goes, I always tell everybody they've got to put damn mirrors or a stoplight in here. You know, that I'm like, this is thrilling. And so I go out.
Good thing you didn't tell him to go get his shine box.
Oh, Lord. I was still, but I go out and I see my buddy Kim and he's like, hello. And he goes, well, hey, I'm in this cart. I've got you in that cart. You and Rick will be there. He'll be here in just a minute. You just call me. And I'm like, okay. Well, he zooms up, walks out. His clubs are they put his clubs on the back of the cart. He walks up and he goes, hi, I'm Rick, and says hello. And he stands on the tee. He goes, I'll tee us off. He goes, all right, here's the deal. $100 to anybody who outdrives me today. And I look at him and I'm like, I don't have $100. He goes, not you who's paying, son. Either you outdrive me or you don't outdrive me. You don't outdrive me, no harm, no foul. You know, if you outdrive me, I'll pay you $100. And I'm like, okay. But I had the opportunity for 4 hours to sit with one of the icons of our industry and have him tell me, do this, don't do this. Try this, don't try this. This is what works. This is what rarely ever works. And it was like, I tell people in Silicon Valley, it was like sitting with Steve Jobs or Bill Gates and have them go, here's how you do this. And this is what I found doesn't work as well. And so I tell you this story that I wonder, who are your legendary names? Who are the ones that you sit back and go, wow, these who I consider the legends of the business?
Well, probably at the top of my list, and not in chronological order, would be Bob Miller, who's in the Hockey Hall of Fame, the longtime voice of the LA Kings, because I worked with the LA Kings in my first NHL role. This was before the Sharks. And it was only for 2 seasons, but Bob, who ended up doing Kings broadcasts for over 40 years on radio and television, really took me under his wing. And I was able to listen. I wasn't doing play-by-play. He was the voice and I was the studio host, but I was able to hear him and hear how he did his job. And he's a mentor to this day and somebody who means a lot to me and a very dear friend. And then before that, another Hall of Fame broadcaster in hockey, Jim Robson, who was the longtime radio voice of the Vancouver Canucks. And then he did television games for Hockey Night in Canada. He's probably the one that I heard the most of early on and just listened to how thorough he was and how detailed he was in his description and correct in his pronunciation and in the way he spoke. There was just always a correctness to that. And I think I've always tried to be correct, because I think one of the main prerequisites for what we do as broadcasters is to speak correctly. And of course, some slang and jargon comes into what we do, but I think people expect a level of correctness in the way you speak. So I always try and bring that to the broadcasts and not to dumb it down. And it's because of individuals like that. But the person who probably gave me the best advice was not a colleague. It was someone who worked in Vancouver in television, a gentleman named Steve Armitage. And he was a longtime broadcaster on CBC, on Hockey Night in Canada, on the Olympics. He had a very successful career. He's now retired. But he told me, as I was trying to decide if I wanted to be a TV sportscaster type, a sports anchor and sit in the studio, or what it was I wanted to do in this business in sports. And he said, if you ever get the chance to do play-by-play, and I hadn't up to that point, he said, take it. Because once you can do play-by-play, which is thinking on your feet, there's no script, there's no teleprompter, you don't know what's going to happen next. When you can ad lib for 2.5 hours, which is what our job is every time we do a game, and it's unpredictable. You might see history that night. It might be a boring run-of-the-mill game. You never know. But he said, when you can ad lib for 2.5 hours, not having a teleprompter will never be a problem with you. Not having a script in front of you will never really be a problem, because you'll be able to talk your way through anything in this business. And that's what I did. I took a job doing soccer play-by-play on the radio. And I started to develop that play-by-play ability, that ability to, for 2.5 hours, carry a broadcast. And on a lot of those broadcasts, I didn't have a color commentator. I was alone. So for those 2.5 hours, you are having a conversation with your listener, and there's no script. There's a few drop-ins that you read, and those are scripted. But other than that, you are describing on the fly. And it turned out to be a great bit of advice, the best advice I ever got. And that's carried me for the last 3 decades of making it up as I go along.
I don't mean to besmirch sportscasters, so please don't hear anyone this way. It would have been such a waste to have you as a TV sportscaster on a TV station or even ESPN. I mean, because you do the stuff they can't do. I mean, and I've told you this before, what's amazing to me is as you said, speak correctly. Your diction and your ability to be precise with your enunciation. And I say that as someone who may be not so good at it, is stunning. And I would think you would learn a lot from soccer, because soccer is that back and forth movement that football isn't, right? If you're doing a football game, it's, Josh Allen hands off to so-and-so and he goes around right in, right? You're not involving everybody involved in the play, right? But soccer, you are having to be precise, going from one to the next to the next. But I would think at a much slower pace than hockey requires.
For sure. And the other thing that soccer helped prepare me for hockey was the international aspect of soccer, and the names and the pronunciations of, literally global players from all over the world end up on soccer teams. And now it's that way with hockey. We have a lot of Russian players, Swedish, Finnish, Norwegian, and on and on. So it served me very well in both those capacities. It just reminded me of a funny story when you speak of, or as we talk about speaking correctly. When I moved from Canada to San Diego, I was able to pretty much leave my little Canadian accent behind. I was good at that. Nobody could really detect it that much. But one of the first weeks I worked, there was a high school football team that won a state championship in California, CIF championship. And the team was from, and I'll spell it out, L-A, and then Canada. So I went on the air and I said, the team from La Canada won the state high school football championship. Congratulations. And I read this story, these guys from La Canada. And the phone lights up. You idiot. It's La Cañada. I said, well, I'm not from Canada. I'm from Canada. And then a couple of weeks later, there was a story about a kid from a town that I called Carpinteria, which is around LA, and it's pronounced Carpinteria. But, those were some minor slip-ups for a Canadian kid who just didn't know any better and thought La Cañada. Hey, looks like La Canada to me. I'm not sure what that little squiggly above one of the A's is, but I'm going with La Canada.
We've all got those stories. My first week on the air in Louisiana. And hey, join us this afternoon over at Richard 66. Phones light up. It's Richard, you idiot. Richard. And I'm like, who knows these things? And
it's calling it Concord when it's conquered.
Yeah, and it's all these different things. Well, it's just like I remember the first time I was like in it. I said Los Gatos.
Sure.
And because and I remember this person turned around and looked at him and he goes, "It's Los Gatos," and I'm like, "What? Where did the loss come from?" And it's LOS. And I'm just, if you move around enough, you're going to have enough of those stories. So now when I go to a new town, my thing, I've not been in a new town, obviously, but my trick when I'm going to a new town, and I'll share this with anybody who moves to a thing. What I would do is I would only eat at local restaurants. I would do no chain restaurants for like the first 2 months I lived there. And on my days off, I would literally get in my car and try to get lost in town. So I would do my best to get lost. And if it took me all day to figure out how to get back to where I was going, that I will have learned the town. And
Right.
because it was mainly, there were big towns to me because I was a town from 3,000 people, but I was in these towns between 30 and 50,000. So they were huge to me. And so if I could talk about different regions of town that I now knew, then I felt like I could connect with everybody instead of just that one little area that as we all do, we all live in our one little spot and that's it.
Yep.
And so our thing, we have to be so much more about, but then you don't, the beautiful thing about that is you don't have to talk about like what's going on in San Jose because you get to focus on just the team. You get to talk about Jimbo and Marlowe and, all the different names. Who would you say, who would you say if you'd have to pick, who is Mr. Shark to you? Who is the quintessential Shark player?
Well, we nicknamed Patrick Marlowe Mr. San Jose Shark. He's retired now, of course, and now works for the Sharks as a development coach and an advisor to our general manager Mike Greer. And Patrick was a first round draft pick and played almost his entire career with the Sharks before he went on to Toronto and Pittsburgh briefly, but to this day has the NHL record as he eclipsed Gordie Howe for the most games played in NHL history by a single player. So he kind of has that nickname. And he's certainly on the Mount Rushmore of San Jose Sharks players as well. You could go back to the early days and some of the players from that era, like Igor Larionov and Arturs Urbe, who was probably the goalie who was the first kind of star that
Be
the
like
San Jose
Wall.
Sharks ever had. Yeah. And they chanted his name, Urbe. And then for a decade, Nabby was a big star with the Sharks. But, for me, as I look at the collective 31 years, in my opinion, and this is not to take anything away from any of those other guys, the one player who has impacted our franchise more than any other for me is Joe Thornton. When he arrived in 2005 or 6, we instantly became a Stanley Cup threat, and we were an automatic playoff team with Joe. And Joe, because of his ability to make plays, I still contend he was the best passer of the puck in his generation. Well, if you're a great passer, that means you're making other players around you better. And no one rose to the occasion more playing with Joe than Jonathan Chichu, who won the scoring championship one year, scoring 56 goals. That's still the most ever by a Shark player playing with Joe Thornton. And for me, Joe just changed the game for the Sharks, embedded the franchise in the Bay Area sports culture, and was so popular because he was larger than life. There's no coincidence that his nickname is Jumbo, because he was that big for our franchise, for our city, for the Bay Area hockey region. So I've got to put Patrick is right there with Joe, but for me, if Joe's 6'4" and Patty's 6'2", Joe's just a couple of inches above Patty on that pedestal, but they both meant a lot to our franchise and, of course, to our fans.
I was at a charity thing one night that Patrick Marlowe was there, and I was doing the auction and stuff like that, and we were doing something, and I looked at him, and I'm like, I don't mean to hurt your feelings, but you piss me off so much. Somebody who is as beautiful as you should not also be a superstar athlete. You should be like an accountant, or you should be working, changing oil. You should not have all of it. And folks, if you don't know who Patrick Marlowe is, pull up his picture and don't let your significant other see it, because you never want to be compared to Patrick Marlowe.
And he doesn't even have any proper hockey scars.
No,
he hasn't lost enough teeth.
How in the world have they not picked him to play Superman?
I know. It's unclear.
He would be the most, and the bad thing about Jumbo, every now and then I'll see him at the golf course, I'll go pitch and putt at and stuff, and he'll be out there with his kids. And I'm like, dude, you can't even hide, because he has the most amazing beard you've ever seen in your life. And it's
that's more than a beard. Jumbo, and he can grow a beard in between periods of a hockey game. Start that game clean shaven like that thing. But it's not a beard. Once he gets it at where it is now, it's not a beard. It's an ecosystem.
I just always wanted to go, man, come on, you're there, But what I do love about San Jose fans too, outside of some people who will just say, hey, Joe, or something like that, or I love you, most people will leave him alone, especially when he's with his kids.
Sure.
That you have that respect that people are like, hey, man, this guy's with his kids. Just leave him alone and sit back and be like that lady was the other night when she goes, I've just never seen him in person. That's Randy Hahn right there. I don't need to talk to him. I just need to see him in person. So that's where you're at. And my friend, thank you. You have been so generous with your time. And this was as much fun as I knew it would be, because I always have fun every time I sit down and talk with you.
Well, it's my pleasure. And it's fun to hear your stories and get to know you better. And the only way that we can properly continue this conversation is on the golf course, my friends. So let's get out there and knock it around soon.
Can we take a cart? I'm not all about that walking it.
Absolutely. And I'll bring the martinis, but only 2.
Randy Hahn.